to Optimum Derby Live. Wherever you're watching us today, you're very welcome, whether that be on LinkedIn or YouTube. Thanks very much for joining us. My name is Martin Crowson, and I'm your host for today, and I'm joined as ever by the MD of Optimum Derby, Tom Heeley. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Martin. How are you? Good week?
Thank you. Yeah, good. You?
Good, very good, thank you. Very good news.
Good. Just before we crack on today, this is the fifth of our weekly look over common injuries that everybody suffers at various different sports. So if you haven't seen them already, please check our YouTube channel out. They're all on there. Please subscribe and you'll get a notification if you hit the little bell about when we're up next. We're trying to do every Wednesday at 4 o'clock at the moment, and we'll keep doing that for the near future. So go and have a see what we've done already. Maybe it's an injury you suffered from, or an injury you're looking to recover from at the minute, or maybe prevent in the future. So go and see what we've done. Today, we're going to be talking about something that affects long distance runners, athletes, cricketers, all sorts of sports again, and that is a stress fracture. And it's something that not a huge amount of us amateur sportsmen know a lot about. So luckily, we've got Tom with us. So Tom, let's start at the top. Exactly what is a stress fracture?
Yeah, so I guess stress fracture, if we look at, take sports like long distance running, for example, stress fracture is where over a period of time, it becomes a chronic, unstable bone, and that can be caused through poor biomechanics, rapid increase in load or stress or volume. So that might be running from 1 mile a week all of a sudden to then like 10 miles a week the week after. And that rapid increase there just puts a greater stress onto the bone, typically in your feet, for example, in that case. Cricket, typically in your lower back, again, just because of that repeated stress from bowling, not so much in batters. But basically, instead of a full bone...
Tom here, just because you're talking about feet.
Yeah. So that's a metatarsal, so that's a third metatarsal stress fracture. Essentially, what's happened there is the mechanics. That could be, let's say that's long distance running. So someone training for a marathon. What will happen is they'll probably have a spike in their training somewhere, and that then will cause that fissure and that little break within the bone. It's not a full blown, so it's not like it's a gap or there's not gaps or a space in between, but it's more just a small little hairline fracture, and it's often not all the way through the bone, so it might just be on
one of the leg here as well.
Yeah, so that's the tibia, so similar sort of picture, and you'll see. I think it's the next picture you've got, Martin, is where it's a whole way through, and you'll get a fracture. So yeah, so that's a typical sort of acute fracture would look like. So you can see the difference between the two. Very, very subtle and very faint on the stress. Very quite clear and obvious on the acute one. And if you just go back once, Martin, onto this X-ray. Yeah. So on the picture on the right-hand side with the white arrow, you can just see that there's a little bit of grey in there and a little bit of dark in there, but actually it doesn't go all the way through. And on the left-hand side, you can see that little bit of a callus starting to form, where you get that little extra bit of bony growth just to support.
Okay, so that's what it looks like. How do they occur, and why do they occur? We're all, if you run 1,000 miles and I run 1,000 miles, no reason why I should get one. You shouldn't. How does it work?
Yeah, and that's the case. Like they often come about when. Yeah, let's take training for a marathon, for example. We'll keep that simple example. So you're training for a marathon, you need to run 26 miles. Instead of just first day going out and running 1, 2, 3 and building it up, and just over a weekly basis, your load gradually increases.
Yeah.
You might get to 5 miles, let's say, and then all of a sudden your mate who you're running with says, let's go and do 10 mile next week. You're going to do 10 mile, and you've only ever done 5 before, so you do 10. That's tough. That's hard going.
Yeah.
And then you might do another one, 12 mile, and that's again tough as well. But actually, what you're putting greater stress through the bones, and that's generally down to the muscles not being strong enough and conditioned enough to support. And over time, what happens is you get that extra little bit of wear through the stress of the area itself, and that's what ends up with a stress fracture. And that could be in your foot, in your tibia, like the other one showed, or even sometimes in your lower back, particularly with boulders where they come through flexion and a bit of rotation.
Okay, and what's the typical process in terms of, I've got a pain in my foot. What am I feeling? Am I feeling a dull ache? Am I feeling a sharp pain? And is this sort of pain that is there all the time, 24 hours a day, or will it come and go? How will I start thinking I may have something that's worth an X-ray here?
Yeah, good. Yeah, so I think the biggest difference between the two is an acute fracture and a stress fracture is that the pain is dull. Pain will be there. It will just nag away in the background. It might be there on every footstep. It might not be there on every footstep. Whereas an acute one, obviously, it's quite obvious. You've probably planted your foot, you've been tackled, or you've been involved in some sort of an accident, or it'd be an acute one-off incident typically.
It's pretty obvious if you got one of those breaks, you'll know about that.
Yeah, I mean, that one's even been pinned and plated, so it's quite clear as day that you probably had a good old whack or had a bad tackle or something. But in a stress fracture, it's probably just going to be a dull, nagging ache. It's going to last for 2 or 3 days. It might drop off, and then you'll go again, and it will come back again. And it will just feel like it's persistent pain that all of a sudden it won't be there, and then it'll be back again. And it will just nag and nag and nag in the back end.
I suppose this will lend the person who's suffering from this to just think, oh, I won't be bothered doing anything about this now because it's not there all the time. It's hurt me Monday, Tuesday. It's not there Thursday, Friday. It's back for a bit Saturday. It's gone again on most of Sunday. One of those things that we would tend to put off and off and off, doing something about, I guess, all the time, making it worse than it was when you initially started.
Yeah, and if you think about how long the bone takes to heal, bone can take anything 8 to 12 weeks to heal. So stress fractures are normally a little bit less than that, but even still, if you take a week off, let's say it's sore you've done a run on the Saturday, it's sore on the Sunday, by Monday, Tuesday, it's getting better. Wednesday, it feels better again. You might go for a run again on the Wednesday, just a short one, and it feels okay. But again, you've not done a lot, so you've just done a shorter distance. You go and do your long run again on the following Saturday, and boom, it's back again. You're like, well, it's felt great again on Wednesday. I could run okay and fine, but it's just that high tolerance of load that it won't be able to support, and then that's when it'll flare up and kick off again. So yeah, it's typically missed and typically left a long time. And if you think the time frame that you need for this to heal, people generally kind of think it feels okay, so go again, and then it doesn't really feel great, and go again, it doesn't really feel great. So it will dip up and down.
And is it just generally down to the mechanics about why some of us get one and some don't? Is there anything specific in those and reasons why people do suffer from them and other people don't? Is it just the way we're built? Is it the way, and we'll get onto this in a second when we talk about ways you can try and prevent these things happening, but how is it that somebody might get one and somebody else might not for doing the same thing?
Yeah, bowling is probably quite a nice one to look at. The bowling action for most people is different. So the way they strike the foot into the floor, obviously.
Cricket bowling.
Cricket bowling. Yeah, sorry. So if you plant your foot nice and hard into the ground on the left-hand side, you're going to get a massive shudder up through your leg, up through your knee, up through your hip, and into your lower back. If you're not strong and robust enough to support that and make that and absorb that force through the muscles rather than accept it through the bones and the joints, that's just going to shudder straight up and into your lower back. Add in, at that point, if you hitting the floor, add in some sort of an overhead rotation with a little bit of a twist, and you start to have that shearing force going on through your lower back. So in that instance, you may look at going down a strengthening route for the landing leg. So that landing leg on the left-hand side for a right-hand bowler, for example, would be something that would be worthwhile strengthening that area to absorb the force a lot more and prevent the pain and the ground reaction force coming all the way up into your lower back. You can stop it way lower down and absorb it lower down.
Okay. So you mentioned cricket there, and we spoke about running as well, but which sports are people more susceptible to suffer from stress fractures in?
Cricket's really high, and especially that lower back area. Long distance running, athletics, and that's about it. It's not super common, but in those longer distance sports or those really repetitive sports, tennis you won't tend to see it because it's haven't got as much impact. Yes, you've got a lot of repetition. Golf again, you've got a lot of repetition, and you may get the odd stress fracture in the lower back, but it's not massive impact like in cricket would. Every time you hit the floor, you get that huge impact.
Yeah, and as a former cricketer myself who used to bowl as well, you can just imagine the pressures going through that central spine area because of that motion we spoke about with the twist, the pounding down the front foot, the follow through as well, coming down, and that repeatedly time and time again. You can see how this happens.
And if you go through a spell as well, so if you go through a spell of bowling, and this might be during pre-season where all of a sudden you've done 3, 4, 5 weeks of not too much work, not too much loaded, got on holiday, laid off the strength work, and you come back in and all of a sudden you ramp up the repetitions or the amount of work that you do. You've gone from, let's say, a standard arbitrary load of, let's say, 0 and all of a sudden you've gone from bowling 0 balls to the next week bowling 250, 300 balls quite quickly.
Yeah.
And then the next week it might go to 500 balls and then 700 balls, and all of a sudden you've kind of gone whoop, like that, and in 3 weeks you've gone from 0 to 700. And that's when you start to get those irritations and those issues. It's not so much those who run every single week and run regularly the same distances. And generally, when you have a massive peak or a massive spike in bowling or running or load, basically, whatever your load is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's one of those weird, unusual injuries where people that play sports like football and rugby don't tend to be susceptible to it, because there'd be more high impact injuries, clean breaks.
Yeah, typically you might see it every now and again towards the end of a rehabilitation phase where someone's been out for a long time, let's say an ACL or a long-term injury, and then return back to running, and they may get like a bit of an irritation in their foot or their ankle if they increase their load a little bit too quickly. But generally speaking, it's quite rare. You don't often see it.
Okay. You spoke about excuse me. You spoke about building up muscles there. So, as usual on our videos, we sort of end it with what can people do to try and prevent them suffering from this at home? What exercise is going to do? It's a bone injury, but there's clearly stuff you can do at home to try and limit the possible damage when you get back to playing, or certainly increasing your load, whatever sport you may be playing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of real simple things. If you're a runner, for example, I'd definitely follow a plan. So if you're a new time to runner, you're training for a marathon, I'd follow a plan. So get yourself a plan offline for marathon, distances, volume, and just stick to the plan. Don't worry about kind of going out your way and feeling like you need to do a little bit more or rush it a little bit and get to certain numbers and distances. Follow a plan, or have a little notebook and write things down, and just note how many miles you're doing in a week, and then just keep the week after and make sure your plan isn't going too quickly, too high.
Right.
Otherwise, from a strength point of view, for those things that we talked about there, your cricket and your running, things like really simple things like leg press is great. Leg press is a really simple exercise, builds up some good strength in the legs, absorbs that force quite nicely.
Yeah.
And then some real simple landing exercises. So just dropping off small boxes to begin with, nothing much more than a step height, 15, 20 centimeters. Drop off that, land on 2 feet, and absorb the force and control and soften the landing.
Okay.
And then repeat that and start to progress that towards a single leg, and absorb that force rather than hitting the floor hard and making a really loud noise. When you land on the floor, it should be relatively soft, relatively quiet, and you have to drop your hips rather than land it and stay really full.
Yeah, and that would help you use that motion as well, of taking that, absorbing that stress when you hit the floor.
That's the biggest thing, is absorbing the force. So things like leg press, a great exercise, because that's that same sort of action, that pump action, and you've got that similar sort of pump action when you land on the floor. You can absorb that sort of same control. Single leg squats, similar example, are great to absorb that force and build that strength down the low leg.
Much like last week's video, Tom, when we put a couple of bench press videos in the comments, have we got anything that we can maybe stick in after we finish today in the comments section below to help people?
And we'll stick in the comment section below. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and talking in the comment section, folks, if you've got any questions after watching today's video that you'd like to ask Tom, please do pop them in the comment section, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, and Tom will do his best to answer them as soon as possible. That's all we've got time for today, mate. Thank you very much for your time as ever. As always, really interesting stuff. Much obliged.
No problems, Martin. Thank you very much. Good stuff.
Okay. Folks, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate you hopping on and listening. As I said, if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. Please check out the videos we've already got on there. You can learn about Achilles tendon tears, concussion, shoulder pain, as we just spoke about there, pain associated with bench presses and that shoulder action when people are at the gym. So please check those out. Let us know what you think of them. Thank you very much for joining. If you would like to find out a little bit more about Tom's business, Optimum Derby, please find out more on the website addressed at the bottom of the screen now. As I've just mentioned, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're suffering from any particular injuries that you believe Tom could help you with, give him a call for an initial consultation, or contact him on the email, which is also at the below of the screen at this moment. We will be back next Wednesday. Tom, what are we talking about next Wednesday?
Next week, we're going to talk about ACLs, and we're going to talk about 2 different types of grafts. You've got a hamstring graft and you've got a patella tendon graft, and we'll talk about the 2 differences.
Now, that is a serious injury.
Options. It's options you've got. We'll talk about that.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks again, Tom, and thank you very much to everyone that's joined us today. We'll catch you next week, Wednesday, 4 o'clock here on Optimum Derby Live. All the best. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.